this is part of the final campaign, I think, for the Red Dragonflight. The information here is nothing new. It's actually quite old. I believe in 2019, Dawn of the Aspects came out, and this effectively gives information that was in Dawn of the Aspects. What makes this really cool, and what we're going to be doing here today, I'm going to go through the images here, and I'm going to show you what was said, and then I'm going to give you a lot more backstory. So if you've not read Dawn of the Aspects, by the end of this video, you should have a very decent idea of everything that transpired, because the Dawn of the Aspects book is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal, especially now with everything that we're going through in the Dragon Isles. What makes this really awesome is that Blizzard decided to take stuff that's in the books, and a lot of the stuff actually deals directly with the premises of the book, and they put it in the game. That's incredible. But okay, so it starts off with, Neltharion used to be one of Alexstrasza's closest friends and confidants. It must have broken her heart to see him fall to madness. Now, backstory here, as I said, we're going to go from picture to backstory and all the rest of it. This is true. When they were Protodrakes, it's actually very interesting how the Protodrakes came together. So Malygos considered himself to be one of the smartest of all Protodrakes, and also the evolution of Protodrakes is a phenomenally interesting thing. All Protodrakes are primal as shit. They basically act on instinct. Most of the Protodrakes could not speak. They didn't have the ability to speak, plan, or anything like that. They literally acted only on instinct. And then suddenly, and genuinely suddenly, some of the Protodrakes started speaking. Very broken. Even Malygos and the other aspects spoke incredibly broken, with the exception of Ysera. Ysera and Galakrond was the only two Protodrakes that seemed to have the ability to speak in full sentences. The actual proper sentences. But Malygos were incredibly, he was incredibly intelligent, purely based on the fact that he could plan things that none of the other Protodrakes could do. He could plan out multiple scenarios of things and how they would play out better than any of the others. Neltharion, on the other hand, and it's sad when you read Dawn of the Aspects, because you do fall in love with Neltharion's character. Neltharion, he was a fighter. He loved fighting. He lived for fighting. At one point in the book, Malygos explains, sort of in his own mind, he says that he doesn't step away from a fight. Malygos will never run from a fight, but he doesn't seek it. Unlike Neltharion, who will seek fights. And constantly, there's this one part in the book where, I guess, an arch rival of Malygos, Koros is his name. I believe Koros. Koros, another Protodrake, him and his sort of gang attack Malygos. They wait for Malygos to get away from everyone else, and then they start attacking Malygos. Neltharion saw that this was happening, and this was before Neltharion and Malygos were even friends. Neltharion saw this happening, and he just helped Malygos. He just came to Malygos' aid just to fight, because there was a fight, the fight seemed interesting, and he's gonna help, right? So he loved fighting, and he was incredibly powerful at it. In fact, Neltharion was the only one of the Protodrakes whose attack actually hurt Galakrond. He actually, after attacking, so he flew down with quite a speed to Galakrond, slammed into his head, feet first, and the book describes it as Galakrond actively stopping because everything was shaked out of proportion. His entire body was tremoring with the force that Deathwing, or Neltharion in this instance, that he landed on his head with. So it was absolutely incredible. But throughout the battle against the Undeath, as well as against Galakrond, Neltharion saved the other aspects on at least 3 different occasions. Neltharion was the one that saved them. So they were truly good friends. They really loved each other. There's also another thing that makes the aspects specifically more unique than any of the other protodrakes. Protodrakes could form bonds with clutchmates. This was not unheard of. While never really close, they could form bonds with their own clutchmates, but never with anyone outside of their own clutch, except for the 5 aspects. The 5 aspects, or would-be aspects, were, for some reason, they managed to form an actual loyal bond with each other, even though they were not of the same clutch. Interesting. Alexstrasza and Ysera were clutchmates. They had a brother, but it seems he fell some time before the aspects were created. Here we have another story that has no conclusion in the books. Malygos is the one that stumbles onto the body of Alexstrasza and Ysera's brother. The reason he knows that the brother is missing and how he knows that this is the brother, he finds Alexstrasza and Ysera looking for their brother. The brother is killed by Galakrond. He shows Alexstrasza the body of her brother, and then when they want to show Ysera, the body is gone. They assume that it must have been scavengers, because what else would have happened? It wouldn't be until later that they discover that all of the protodrakes that Galakrond have been consuming come back. They are born again as undead. At least this is what they call them, because they're neither dead nor really alive, and Galakrond can control them. Without Galakrond's control, they're effectively like the Scourge. Even though I would say, though, the book tries to make it seem like they're not exactly the same as the Scourge. They're somewhat the same as the Scourge. But his body is gone. For the rest of the book, most of the book in fact, Ysera is continuously checking the piles of corpses that they find after every battle to look for her brother. Because they don't know whether the brother was killed before Galakrond figured out how to reanimate them or after. The other thing that we don't know is whether or not this animation process is controlled or just a happy accident. It happens automatically. We do not know this. Ultimately, though, they never found the brother. Now, there's been rumors and things that Alexstrasza did actually find her brother, and that she's been keeping the brother, sort of doing experiments on him, but that would be rumors, and we genuinely don't know whether or not that is true. Let's move on to the next one. Looks like Ysera was always the gentle one. Says here she thought peace could be made with the undead. Odd. None of our history mentions the dragons fighting undead. Very interesting. You guys know the whole Galakrond is considered to be the progenitor of dragons, the father of dragons. Not quite. The dragons lied to everyone about Galakrond. Why they lied is actually, I think, rather genius. Their decision to lie was so that no other dragon or protodrake would ever follow in Galakrond's footsteps. Every dragon, apart from the aspects, alive today, believe that all of them came from Galakrond. He was their father. This is why when you go to Dragonblight in Northrend, you will find dragon corpses all around Galakrond. They go to die next to their father. All of dragonkind. This is where they lay down, usually facing Galakrond, and spend their final moments before they die. Because he's their dad. The reason they changed it is so that no one would ever follow in his footsteps. Now, Ysera, right? It wasn't so much that she wanted to make peace with the undead, she wanted to make peace with Galakrond. She believed that Galakrond can be reasoned with, that they could find a way to live with Galakrond. And there's a reason why she believed this. Galakrond wasn't always the evil monster that just wanted to consume everything. In fact, Galakrond is described as being rather gentle and also very understanding. He was actually one of the few proto-drakes that was incredibly intelligent, but he never really bullied anyone or abused anyone or anything to that effect. It wasn't until after he came back from wherever he went that Galakrond ultimately, you know, started feasting. But Ysera tried time and time again. Now, the interesting thing is that it wasn't naivety. It was her nature. Ysera was never a fighter. She's also considered to be much smaller than the other proto-drakes. She was actually the smallest of all of them. But, and I don't know why this is, but this is interesting. At one point, Galakrond opens his mouth because he's trying to eat Alexstrasza. Ysera steps into the fight, this time for the first time. This is the first time that Ysera actually joins the fight. It is to save Alexstrasza, if my memory serves me correctly. She breathes into Galakrond's mouth, and this causes Galakrond immense pain, to the point that Galakrond literally cannot do anything other than trying to get rid of whatever the hell she breathed into his mouth. It's going to become relevant later on when you start to understand how proto-drakes operate, and also one of my theories have been confirmed in the game so far. But alright, so it says here that before Malygos became an aspect, he almost succumbed to undeath. That doesn't make any sense. What undeath are they talking about? During a fight with one of the undead. So the undead had two types of attacks. One was the normal scraping and biting, you know, clawing like dragons would. The other was a breath attack. The breath attack was interesting. It is said that as soon as the breath touched you, it felt like life left the body. In other words, you couldn't move, you couldn't really do anything. You were just sort of stunned in this sort of in-between place, waiting for death. During one of the tuffles and the fights with the undead, an undead bites Malygos on his leg. Malygos then continues, because Malygos is following Kronos, the dragon that, you know, his arch rival, because Kronos has hatched a plan behind the back of the other proto-drakes. So Talenixia she was for a time the leader of all the proto-drakes, because she was leading a massive war. I believe it's Talenixia. She was leading a massive war against Galakrond. She believed that Galakrond was one, and they were many, and therefore they could defeat Galakrond, no problem. And one of her, like, her main general was this Kronos fellow, right? Although Kronos had hatched a new plan. He was going to become like Galakrond. So Malygos never trusted him, followed him, and in this pursuit of the dragon, Galakrond came into a fight with the undead, and the undead bit him. Then Malygos sees... It's actually quite disturbing when you read it in the book, but he watches as these proto-drakes eat one smaller red dragon as well as a bronze dragon. They consume a smaller red and bronze dragon. When Malygos approaches the corpses of these proto-drakes, he smells something. It's a life essence that these proto-drakes give off that he has never been able to smell before. But after being bitten, there's a hunger inside of him. He wants to bite into this proto-drake. And he actually does. He bites into the proto-drake. He has the meat in his mouth. He's about to swallow. Like, he literally throws the meat into the air, opens his mouth as if to catch it, and in the last moment pulls himself back. He's like, no, I cannot do this. Right? And he spits it out, sort of clears his mouth, and then flies after Kronos as well. And then he witnesses Kronos and his fellows meet a terrible end at the hands of Galakrond. Because they went to Galakrond and they explained to Galakrond that they would join him and that they had also eaten their own brothers and they were going to be strong as well. And Galakrond didn't like this idea. You see, Galakrond wanted to be the only strong one. He wasn't looking for allies. He was looking for food, effectively. So he ate them. And it's actually scary as shit how quick he did it as well. Like, they didn't even have time to turn. He had all of them in the blink of an eye. They were all dead. But yeah, Malygos did almost succumb. And according to the Keeper Tyr, it was Malygos' will. Because the only thing that could have stopped him from turning into undeath was a very strong will to resist the urge. Alright, so here we have sort of a change in pace now. 3 separate incidents have been recorded where the dragon has nearly breached the containment sphere. This proto-dragon has been imbued with the element of earth. It exhibits an increase in scale density with a minor reduction in flexibility compared to baseline proto-dragons. You will be forgiven for thinking that Tyr, because this is who we're dealing with here, this is Tyr and he's sort of telling you about observations that he's made. You'd be forgiven for thinking that Tyr is describing his own process here. No. You'd also be forgiven for thinking that Tyr just happened to stumble upon the aspects. No. Tyr have been watching the Protodrakes for a really long time. The Protodrakes fascinated Tyr for a number of reasons. The one was their significant jump in intelligence that no one could explain. The other was their innate ability to infuse with magic on a scale and level that is almost unheard of. But what's more interesting is that this infusion process seems to be magical in and of itself. This Tyr could never actually understand. It also describes in the book that the aspects we have today were not Tyr's first choice. In fact, Tyr sort of hints at this idea that there were multiple Protodrakes that came before the aspects, and that he finally decided to choose the aspects, the Protodrakes that would become aspects, because of that loyalty we spoke about earlier. They were the first Protodrakes he ever discovered that not only were highly intelligent, had powers, because each of them had their own powers. Nosdormu, for example, breathed sand, right? And he could literally create rocks inside like the throat of Galakrond, inside his eyes, because the sand could literally merge together to create rocks. Neltharion had the ability to breathe tremors, like physically create tremors with his mouth, as well as with his body. Malygos had ice attacks. Alexstrasza had fire attacks. And then Ysera had this breath attack that seemed to be lifelike, because that actually harmed Galakrond incredibly well. It did a lot of damage to him, and that's the only thing I can think of. But almost all of the Protodrakes had these abilities, even the primal ones, the ones that had no ability to think. They all had this infusion with some kind of element that Tyr could never make sense of. The fact that this does not result in an equal but opposing force applied to the dragon implies the process is innately magical as opposed to mechanical. So in other words, this is not part of a natural evolution of them. Because you would sort of expect to see, if they're gaining magical abilities, they would suffer in some other way, right? Because there would have to be a cause and effect here. But that's not what we're seeing. They're still Protodrakes. They're just more powerful due to another form of magic. This, of course, we have to start asking ourselves, where did this come from? what is this magic? And this comes full to fruition with the Galakrond question as well. Infused with the element of air, this dragon has gained the ability to express gusts of wind from its body, resulting in an effective, if rudimentary, deterrent to nearby foes. Is there any element? This is where I told you guys one of my theories have been confirmed, right? Is there any element or even energy that, given the appropriate conduit, vessel, and time, proto-dragons are unable to integrate? Remember, a while back, I made a video about what I believed was sort of an innate ability of proto-dragons. Proto-dragons seems to have an incredible affinity for absorbing magic, for becoming part of it. When they come into contact with foul, it doesn't take long for foul proto-drakes to emerge. They literally just seem to absorb the foul and then become one with it. They're like sponges. And now, Tyr says exactly the same thing. Is there any element or even energy that, given the appropriate conduit, vessels, and time, proto-dragons are unable to integrate? Now, this is where we get to what I argue the limitations of the aspects are. You see, the proto-drakes are not limited in what power they can be infused with. They can be infused with any power, perhaps even all power. The elements or the aspects cannot. The aspects have their powers, and these are the only powers that they have. End of discussion. Which to me suggests at least a path to explaining why the primal incarnates are as angry as they are at the aspects. Because the primal incarnates believe that the dragon aspects gave away the gifts of the proto-drakes for a lesser gift of slavery to the Titans. And then, of course, we have the fact that a proto-dragon's complete inversion of their elemental tendency is not only possible, but so thorough, generates an intriguing thought exercise. In other words, they don't just use the magic of the element that they wield, they become it. They become the element that they wield, which, again, we are told that proto-drakes stem from the elemental plane. This is where they were born. But more and more, information emerge that does not make that feel obvious to me. Like, why would the elements create beings like this that can literally absorb almost fucking everything? Anything can be absorbed and used given enough time and sort of distance to the thing. It's very, very weird to me. Infused with the element of water, this proto-dragon has lost its fire-breathing capabilities and gained an equally lethal ability to, in its stead, the frozen possibilities of ice. This would be similar to what Malygos could do. And then we have, additionally, those infused with fire are responsible for more attempted outbreaks than the other proto-dragons combined. I think I know why this is. Rose Fox, by the way, 2 months, part of the DJ Nation, appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Who, of all the elements that we know, Ragnaros and the fire elements are potentially the worst. Ragnaros is the one element that has never stopped fighting, constantly escaped, constantly tried to escape. He's just, he cannot be contained. No matter what we've done, Ragnaros and the fire elementals have always tried to get free. Always tried to basically attack, so to speak, and control. gate control of the entire Azeroth, if even possible. So this would suggest that whatever that property is that exists within Ragnaros was also transferred to the fire protodrakes. That property. Now, the question is that a property that is innate to the fire realm, or simply innate to Ragnaros at the time that the protodrakes were created? This I sadly cannot answer, but yeah. The element of fire has seen one of the most successful adoption rates of the species, with subjects able to hold globes of fire hot enough to melt metal. I wonder why. Why would fire be the most successful one? Maybe because that was the base. So what if the story of the original Protodrakes was wrong? What if Protodrakes was in fact the invention of the fire realms? And from there, they sort of started adopting other types of magic. Could that explain? Because that's the only thing I can think of. What would make fire different to any of the other elements? Technically speaking, it shouldn't be that difficult. And yet it is. I mean, yeah, we can say fire spread, but wind does too. You know? Earth is everywhere. So technically speaking, if we're just going by what those elements do, all of them should have an equal ability to really go ham, right? And yes, it's part of older draconic lore, of course. Fire is part of dragons, and that has always been. But there's no evidence, or at least none yet, that Blizzard would have followed that. Because these aren't dragons, right? These are drakes, proto-drakes specifically, which are very different. They are the origin species of dragons, but they are not dragons. Might be the destructive nature of fire. It might be the adaptability of fire. It might just be the simplicity of it, right? So while the other elements can be a lot more difficult, fire is basic. It's simple. It's easy to understand. That might be it. Anyway, that's the end of the slideshow, I guess, that I wanted to share with you guys. The thing that I really just wanted to highlight with all of this, and the thing that's so amazing to me, is that Blizzard decided to put such a huge part of Dawn of the Aspects into the game, so that players that never read the book actually at least have some information to go on. It's not complete, and obviously, since I've read the book, this is insane, right? And I love this because I know all of this. I've seen it, and believe me, it's worth the read if you haven't. But all of this effectively reinforces a single question. Who or what made Galakrond? The Proto-Drakes have this ability to infuse with all types of magic. Galakrond infuses with decay. How? How does decay touch him? And then a bigger question for Galakrond becomes, when did Galakrond fuse with decay? Was it after he ate his first Proto-Drake, or was it before? Malygos has a sensation of wanting to eat a Proto-Drake after being bitten by an undead. But it was only after. Could the same be true for Galakrond? So Galakrond discovers some power, perhaps an old god, perhaps something even far more ancient than an old god. But Galakrond discovers this power. This power transfers to him the essence of decay, And this is what leads to him being able to detect the life essence of proto-dragons. I don't believe that it's Titan experiments, because I believe that G'huun happened after Galakrond as a direct result of the Titan Keepers trying to understand Galakrond. Because Tyr had no idea, just FYI. Tyr, on multiple occasions, described to the aspects, or the would-be aspects, they knew that Galakrond was traveling in some direction on Azeroth. What they could never have known is what he would find in that direction. This they didn't plan on. They didn't think that he would find whatever it is that he found. They never actually tell us what it is that he found. Tyr plays that secret very close to his chest all throughout the book. But then once he returns, he's this Galakrond thing, and they don't know. So it's also not obvious that whatever Galakrond found was decay, because Tyr is baffled by the fact that what Galakrond found would actually turn him into what he has been turned into. So it suggests that whatever it is, it's not obviously decay. It is something else, some other power that can do things that isn't obviously innate to it. Don't know what that is. But I wanted to share this with you guys because I thought it was really, really cool. And also, I've been dying for a reason to sort of talk about the Dawn of the Aspects. I just recently reread it, because the first time I read it, I wasn't really that bought into it. And then after Dragonflight, or just before Dragonflight really launched, I read it again. I don't know if something's changed. This has happened to me in the past where I'll watch a series. A good example of this would be Walking Dead. I watched the first season of Walking Dead 4 times before I finally fell in love with it. On the 5th time is when I actually kept watching. I don't know what changed, but something changed. Because this time I picked up the book, first chapter. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I enjoy this the first time? This is so cool. So rereading it, I'm currently rereading War of the Ancients as well. And probably next up I'm going to reread Day of the Dragon. Because, yeah, I just want to really get all of my knowledge back into it again. And sort of see things that I may have missed the first time around. But the reread's been phenomenal. I'll be honest with you. It's been incredible. Because we're finally seeing this in game, right? We're seeing this world, this beautiful place that, you know, previously most of these actions would have been purely theoretical, and now we're actually able to see it. So it's an absolutely incredible read. If you haven't done so, I would highly suggest reading Dawn of the Aspects again. It is absolutely worth it. But yeah, I wanted to at least flex that a bit for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, leave a like, subscribe to all of the patrons, Twitch subs, YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support. It means the absolute world to me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, peace.